Hermione watched as his thin, pressed lips curled upward, and before her startled eyes Severus Snape smiled broadly, showing off his snarled teeth in evidence of a lack of basic dental care. It was beyond scary. The man looked like a pirate. "Tisk, tisk, Miss Granger. What have your parents to say about your proposition, then? Tell me, are they more repulsed by their little girl lusting after her big, bad ex-professor, or the prospect of having a convicted murderer in the family?"
Lusting? I assure you, Mr. Snape, I have never harbored any lust for you. Loathing, perhaps, but certainly never lust. As for Monica and Wendell Wilkins, let's just say they don't exactly remember having a daughter, and everyone involved prefers it that way.
Then I take it you are quite serious about this? At her nodded affirmation, Severus thoughtfully stroked his beard. I assume there will be something for me out of this arrangement.
Naturally.
Then you'll have to spell it out for me in detail before I could possibly give your request proper consideration. Hermione nodded before pulling out a large roll of parchment from her satchel.
I've familiarized myself with the terms of your incarceration and cannot find any prohibition against marriage. Actually, I was able to find support of it in the case law of Phillips versus the Ministry of Magic.
Severus rolled his eyes, not that she noticed. Her bushy head was burrowed deep in the parchment before her. It would hardly have been a challenge to pluck her wand right then and there.
Once married, you can't be denied access to your wife for visits.
Conjugal visits? He asked with a broad smirk, clearly enjoying the way he threw her off balance.
Sex? What the hell would give him the idea she'd be interested in having sex with him? Hermione didn't bother hiding her hasty perusal of his body, or the shudder of revulsion. The imagery of his bony little hips hitting hers was downright frightening. She hadn't been so squicked by the mere thought of sex since the time she'd caught Phineas and the fat lady in a compromising position, and chocolate pudding hadn't seemed right for months after that. Certainly not. As if I would... Professor, if I were interested in that sort of relationship, I would have found someone much more suitable than yourself. Actually, I've come to you specifically because you are specifically prohibited from conjugal visits.
She replied rather smugly than strictly necessary.
That in your life sentence, of course.
Well, since you're not going to provide me with pussy, I ask again, how does this benefit me, Miss Granger? I'm not a man taken to acts of charity. She snorted loudly.
Clearly.
Then composed herself again and pulled out a large tablet of parchment. Even at a distance, Severus could make out the rules governing his incarceration. As your wife, I could significantly improve your situation and give you comfort in other ways. Such as? I need an example, Miss Granger, if you intend on dangling this unattractive carrot in front of me. Frowning, she flicked her wand at him and huffed. Scourgify. Though it could be considered an act of mercy given his condition, Scourgify was quite an insult to any wizard. The spell was created for household spills and cleanups, and was generally considered to be too abrasive to use on the skin. For Severus, it felt as if he had just been licked by a large, dry Kneazle tongue. It did, however, cut through the caked layer of grime. The Scourgify was followed by an air deodorizing charm. It wouldn't last long, as the mattress emitted its own particular brand of foul air. The shallow sink often burbled up something quite noxious. And then there was, of course, the stench of the privy. His cell was indescribably wretched in the best of seasons, and twice as putrid in summer. For the moment, it was a welcome reprieve. One would have thought Severus would have grown accustomed to the stink as one often does when surrounded by a constant barrage. He had not. His hands flew up to rake through the dense, tangled mess of his beard. Even his chin felt nominally clean. As a member of the general public, I must petition the ministry to see you. As your wife, I'll have access to your person whenever I wish. Furthermore, I'll be able to bring you items, handle your affairs and correspondence, as well as bring you food. Now, I don't know exactly what you're fed, but given the horrible state of your person, I'd hazard to guess that the diet does not agree with you. Severus gave a short bark laugh, but didn't otherwise interrupt. Well, I'm not going to make myself available to your every whim. I believe we can reach a suitable accord. She pulled out a quill and rummaged again in her satchel before producing a marriage contract. It was simply good business practice to always assume the sale. Proffering the item to him, Severus accepted the self-inked quill and contract, placed them on his bed, and made a rather aristocratic dismissive wave of his hand.
Wait, you're sending me away?
Of course, girl. Did you really think I'd just agree to this insanity? I need to contact my solicitor. Come back in 2 weeks and leave the other paperwork, will you?
Your solicitor? She asked, flabbergasted. I assure you, Professor Snape, the contract is in order. I've thoroughly covered all the bases. Please have a look at it.
Oh, yes. I suppose I can trust you just because you're some morally superior erstwhile Gryffindor. Miss Granger, you waltz in here unbidden and unwelcome, spend all of 5 minutes spinning this tale, ignoring the fact that I have no proof of this marriage law, and expect me just to sign this tripe. Hermione sat as far back as she could to avoid flying spittle from his twisted mouth. It occurs to me that you might not be the only witch in this predicament, making me quite the marketable wizard. By the end of this week I might have stacks of marriage proposals to sort through. I'll need at least 2 weeks to settle my affairs and list my demands.
Demands?
Did I stutter? Yes, of course, you silly girl. Now go and don't darken my doorstep any longer. 2 weeks. He dismissed her like a house elf. Hermione didn't need to be told twice. She practically threw her carefully done research at him, and at the cell door she turned, remembering his transfigured washcloth. He'd probably need it, but given the covetous way he'd stared at the chair, she decided to leave it as something to remember her by.
Out! She screamed. Let me out of this damn place!
The cell door quickly swung open, and just as quickly shut, leaving Professor Snape with the most reading material he'd had in over a year. He smiled to himself, grabbed the quills she had left behind, and made his aching back quite comfortable in the armchair. All in all, it was the best day he could remember in a long time. Now, all he had to figure out was how to best milk the situation to his advantage.